Hi, welcome to our podcast. I'm Mary Abazia, and I have Tom Spitali and Sean Wellham, and we're all from Impact. And this podcast, we're dedicating to what we're calling the flavors of marketing. And the reason is that, around the world, any company that we walk into, the first thing we're trying to assess is what do they think marketing is and what is the role of marketing in the organization. And we actually have done a segmentation on this, so it helps us understand what we should do with companies. But it strikes us as, it's a disconnect if you get hired into a company and you think you're doing one type of marketing role and the organization thinks different. Or a lot of times we have senior managers that said they get hired into a team and they said, these people don't know anything about strategic marketing and they all are just filling out brochures. So we thought we would go into this more and identify, help you maybe even sort out for yourself and your team. And then what are ways that you can move your organization if there's a different way to help have a marketing role. So with that in mind, I'm going to pick randomly Sean that's going to go and take us to the next part of this, Sean.
Well, what are we trying to think of? What is the definition? Is that a question that can even be answered? Because I don't think it can, right? Because I think, as you said in the intro, Mary, it means so many different things to different people. I guess it'd be interesting to get our perspective on what we think it is. We spend our life in this sort of area. I'm going to go first, as you handed me the baton, but I'll be very brief. I think marketing in the B2B world where we tend to exists across all of the commercial functions, including sales. I don't see a split between sales and marketing, because in terms of positioning, in messaging, to some degree, targeting, segmenting, all those things are relevant to sales and should be created collaboratively with sales. So I think sales and marketing, and to me, it's ultimately about the two questions. Marketing is about who do we want to talk to, and then what is it that we want to say to them. So that's my opening gambit, the simple version. Tom, what do you complicate that for me?
Yeah, I'm struck by the irony of the fact that a lot of times we are called into companies to help them create a common vocabulary for marketing, but they don't have a common definition of what marketing is. So that's what we're trying to do here, right? I think that my definition of marketing might even be simpler than yours, Sean, in words, but it becomes very, very dynamic after that. I think marketing is how you're going to differentiate your products or services in the marketplace. Now, what that presupposes is a couple of things that I think to be true. One is that you have to be differentiated. That's really what matters to the customer. So you kind of start with that premise. But then when you say, well, how you're going to differentiate in the marketplace, that leads to a lot of different things. And as you kind of alluded to, Sean, that touches a lot of different functions. So I also think that begins to suggest that marketing is, and this is a word we use a lot, has to be an orchestrator. They have to orchestrate the many cross-functional entities that go into making sure that your products and services are differentiated and unique in the marketplace. So that's a pretty simple definition, but because there's so many legs of that, then you can start to say, well, a lot of those legs, a lot of those aspects of differentiation fall into maybe different functional areas that exist in a company. Some of them that are known as marketing, but others of them that are known as sales or medical affairs or what have you. So that's why it gets complicated. And that's why when you talk about marketing, a lot of times we talk about marketing with the big M and the small m, the big M being kind of the definitions that we're going at right now, the one that Sean proffered, the one that I'm proffering, big M. But a lot of companies marketing is a small m, which is, there's still all these things that need to be done around strategy and how you're going to go to the marketplace, and marketing with the small m is just one little tiny piece of that, which is fulfilling, making brochures and supporting sales. Mary?
Yeah, my favorite quote was from Beth Comstock at GE when she called us in, and she said, "I have 5,000 marketers, and they don't have a clue what marketing does here at GE." So that was, so there is a cultural thing, even though there were a lot of people that were marketers, there was a way of doing things, and and good for her. She wanted to make sure there was like you said, the common language. To add to what you're saying, I love what you guys are saying about sales and marketing being together and differentiation being the goal. So I'm just going to layer up a little bit on that and say that there's the big M is typically more, in some companies, the upstream, and that's where more of the future, the trends, all of those things. Marketing's job is to be the periscope that looks out and says, "This is what's coming, guys. Be ready for this." So, and I think that sometimes gets labeled upstream. Not all industries or organization has that, but that is more that role of the big M is who are our stakeholders now and in the future? What is going on with our competitors now and in the future? A marketer that just sits there and says what's happening now is really just not doing anyone service. So I think that future looking role is really important for that upstream thing. And then the downstream, that's where it has to be clear, concise. What are we going to do? What are we not going to do? And that sometimes gets called the little m, or that's where you end up seeing the brochures or even digital media being developed, but it should hopefully link to the upstream. But a lot of times there's a huge disconnect in those two. So
ultimately, to me, the other thing about marketing being the way we express or add value, create value for clients, and then deliver that value, communicate that value. If you look at that, it really is the front end of the business. That everything else is supportive. The operations, all the different functions, legal, finance, HR, and so forth, are these supporting functions. But the essence of the business is to generate revenue and customers, typically, and therefore marketing owns a huge amount of that, and therefore it's very closely tied to the strategy of the business. Because if the business on a grand corporate strategy is deciding to expand into particular countries, invest in new product research and development, or to consolidate somewhere, or maybe even to dispose of certain products or business units, all of that really is the ultimate start of any marketing. Marketing is the execution, if you like, of a strategic plan, unless the business is massively in retreat, in which case, and that happens. But as a general rule, marketing and strategy are very, very close bedfellows, I would say.
Agreed. And I think that regardless of how you define marketing in your organization, what's really important is to realize that all the functions that we're describing, upstream, downstream, they've got to be done by someone, and not just one someone, right? Typically that it's dispersed across, a number of functional areas, some of which might even be called strategy, the strategy function. And then there's the sales function, and there's the marketing function. The idea, though, as Mary said earlier, is that whether there is a single marketing entity that owns all of upstream, downstream activities, or there's a dispersed set of functions that own those activities, the important thing and the big flaw that we see is when those aren't joined up, and we see it all the time. Sometimes strategy just becomes a binder that sits on the shelf, even if it's not from McKinsey, it's from somebody inside the organization. It still might not get utilized. We just were talking with somebody yesterday that is actually the very problem with the downstream, is they're not referencing what's going on upstream. So that is the big thing, is how do companies join that up? What do they do to make sure that that's not a problem?
Yeah, I like, it always reminds me of the saying that companies take product plan A, B, C, D, and they staple them together and say, here's our company strategy. The power of the staple. But what also strikes me is I love to listen to Bloomberg, and I listen to how the shareholders and the board of directors have these roles to protect the company. Disney is a big one that is being discussed right now, and there is no one that really protects the customer. Now, you logically think, if the customers are being taken care of, the shareholders and the management, that should by default be happening. But a lot of times everyone gets sucked into internal stuff and you lose the view. So I think another really important role of a marketer is making sure that they kind of run through the halls and say, this is what we need to do for the customer. And by the way, there are more than one type of customer. There's these segments of customers that exist, and this is our priority on them. So I don't know, do you guys agree, or do you see it different?
I do. I think I used to say that marketing, in a previous role I had, that one of the roles of marketing was to be the customer advocate. And what I mean by that is obviously there's a conflict. The business needs to make profit, needs to capture some value, and the customer wants to have the maximum value. So that you're not exactly a spokesperson for the customer. But when I mean advocate, what I mean by that is when the business is considering making changes, outsourcing a key aspect of the service to a third party, perhaps, or cutting back on element of operations that may lead to delayed or longer delivery times, and so on and so forth, or changing whatever it is, it's that voice of the customer through marketing. If you're truly in touch with the customers, then you should be able to represent their view and at least make sure that decisions aren't made that have a negative impact on the customer without that being fully understood. Sometimes you can't avoid it, but having that ability to represent the customer, especially when operational or internal decisions are being made. So I think it's a really strong aspect of marketing is to be the voice of the customer from within.
And we do talk about outside in a way that I think is instructive and supportive of this point, that marketing is the customer advocate, because I know when we talk about the right perspective of a company marketer and a marketing person is outside in, by meaning outside, you take the view and the advocacy and the frame of mind of the customer. But we don't say outside only. We say outside in, meaning we have to find the intersection of those needs that match our capabilities and our profit goals. So I think a lot of times people inside of an organization, when marketing is advocating for the customer, think that marketing is doing something that's going to lead the company to ruin or unprofitability, and nothing could be further from the truth. If marketers are doing their job, they have helped the organization, first of all, figure out which targets are likely to be to deliver profits, be willing to pay, or really value the value proposition enough that they will pay a price that allows the company to make a profit. And if the organization understands that, and marketing kind of can prove, or whoever's, again, I say the word marketing, but whoever is in charge of that customer advocacy in the organization, if they do their job right and they convince the organization that, hey, this isn't about the road to ruin, this is about our best chance to thrive in our industry and in our market, and to dominate and to win, then that's the right kind of perspective to have about customer advocacy, about customer focus. It's the road.
You raised something interesting there, Tom, as well, which is this idea that a well-run marketing department or marketing function will drive the business forward. But of course, in reality, the opposite is also true, where a poorly run marketing function can drive the business off a cliff by pursuing the wrong message to the wrong people. It has huge power. And I think that's one of the reasons why it also carries a degree of suspicion. That the other elephant in the room with marketing is it's not always taken seriously for a number of reasons. One, because they can overpromise and underdeliver. That's a natural part of any sort of growth agenda, is to shoot for the stars. But they can also get things completely wrong and have a major negative impact on the business, or the promises they made are heavily discounted. You know, we're going to add X much cash flow, this amount of profit or margin. Most businesses in the planning section dilute that, thinking that's a little bit of wishful thinking, that's marketing thinking. Whereas when it comes down to cutting costs, driving efficiencies, increasing productivity, a lot more credibility is given to those departments that are taking cost out. And I think that's another challenge for marketing, is you need the discipline to enhance the credibility, because you're right, Tom, only they will be able to drive the business forward. But if we take it as a big picture view, I'm sure the reputation of marketing isn't as solid as we would perhaps like it to be.
No, it isn't. And one of the things that we saw, especially during the pandemic, is where does the role of marketing end? You know, and we had the belief that supply issues and that really belonged more with manufacturing or with a product manager, because if a marketer or marketing team is stretched too thin, they end up putting out a lot of fires and not really doing some of these other really important roles that we're talking about. But it's hard, because sometimes that's the thing of the day, and marketing seems to be the one that gets called for those things. So it's a little that one's a little bit trickier, I think.
Yeah, no, I think there's an element of if you can, nothing that marketing can do, because you also want to you're creating beyond just satisfied customers, you want to create this fan base as well. Another thing that marketing can do is have, as much as they're the advocate for the customer within their organization, you also want to create advocates for your business within customers' organizations. You know, you want to create that sense of community, for want of a better word, where your customers are not just seeing you transactionally or just as a product, but understanding those layers and that breadth and depth of the offer. And the more you can ingrain yourself in. And so marketing's job is to constantly be making those connections post-sale, through service issues, through renewals, whatever it is. Marketing has to always be looking to turn a transactional customer into a fan. You know, that's almost the job doesn't end when the customer signs the dotted line. In many ways, that just it's the beginning of a new phase of customer engagement.
I think one of the things that organizations should consider, and we see it occasionally, but not very often, is they continue to operate marketing and sales as separate entities, and that inherent conflicts that's there can often cause some of the problems that we're talking about, right? A lack of connection between upstream and downstream, being reactive instead of proactive, all of those things. I feel like the time is now for organizations to consider bringing those two functions together under something we often call it commercialization, a commercialization function, and require that there's a single head over both of those functions, because that will lead to marketing and sales working together a lot better. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And some of the more advanced companies are doing that. We're at time now, so I'm gonna give everyone a challenge that, if you can, write on a Post-it note what you believe marketing's role is, and have everyone on your team do the same, and then compare notes and see if you all are aligned, or if there's a disconnect. It might be a good thing to work on together, because hopefully you have a lot of different ideas from what we've just discussed. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.